Information discussed in this podcast may be sensitive in nature to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. Portia LaKendra Nesbitt began dating Chadwick Washington as soon as he was released from prison in 2019. Chadwick had a history of domestic violence, battery, stalking, and theft, so needless to say, not everyone in Portia's inner circle was happy with her choice. In 2020, she was living with Chadwick in Waynesboro, Georgia. Because she stayed pretty isolated from family and friends at this point, it's hard to say what was truly going on in Portia's life. She was so isolated, in fact, that in the summer of 2021, her family started realizing that no one had seen or heard from Portia in quite some time. Efforts to track Portia down were unsuccessful. That July, her family called authorities to report her missing. It was then they backtracked and did some research, only to discover that no one had heard from her in over a year. Portia's story isn't an isolated one. Looking through missing person reports across the US and Canada, there are hundreds, maybe thousands, just like hers. Someone without a large inner circle to notice when they go missing. Then, when it is noticed, months or even years have gone by, leaving everyone to wonder, where should they even begin to look? Portia Nesbitt was a 35-year-old woman in 2020. It is believed that something bad may have happened to her, but the truth is we just don't know. Where is Portia LaKendra Nesbitt? Hello, and welcome to the Where Are They podcast and another unsolved missing persons case. We generally almost always cover lesser known cases, but Portia's case sadly didn't make any media outlets until her boyfriend was arrested for charges that were related to Portia, although not exactly related to her disappearance. At first, I didn't think there was enough to cover in Portia's case, even for a mini episode. But I truly do feel that every single missing person case needs to be shared with the public. Portia deserves to be found whether we know a lot about her or not. She deserves to be brought home, and if something bad did indeed happen to her, she deserves justice as well. If you are here listening to Portia's story, thank you so much for your support as a subscriber or as a Patreon member. It's your support that helps us share more cases and stories such as Portia's. As I've said, we don't know much at all regarding Portia Nesbitt, but here's what we do know. She was living in Dublin, Georgia, prior to moving to Waynesboro with her boyfriend, Chadwick Washington. Portia was between 35 and 38 years old. And the reason I say it this way is every missing person file or note on her disappearance has her a different age. Sometimes 35 when she was last seen, which would be 2020, but some of those records dated 2021 have her as 38. Without being able to independently verify, I'm going to put her age somewhere between 35 and 38 years old. In 2021, Portia was believed to have been living with her boyfriend, Chadwick. We will talk more about him in a minute. Unfortunately, I can't find much information about who Portia was as a person. Her social media doesn't reveal much, although it does show some family pictures, and it does show that she has over 2,000 Facebook friends. There are some photos, most of her photos actually have young children in them, and she has posts supporting both Alabama and Georgia college sports teams. Despite all of this, Portia seemed to have limited contact with family and friends by 2020. I also can't share a reason for this. We do know that she was in a relationship that was quite troubled, and we do know that that relationship started sometime in 2019. In the summer of 2021, Portia's family began to compare notes with each other about Portia, and they quickly learned that no one had seen or heard from her since the summer before, back in July of 2020. They decided at that time they needed to call authorities and report her as missing. The first step was to track down Chadwick. This is someone who should have known her whereabouts, or at least could probably point them in the right direction. But Chadwick told law enforcement that Portia had moved back to Dublin, Georgia quite a while before. He couldn't remember exactly when, but it had been a while, he said. Detectives took it a step further and they looked into Portia's finances. She was on disability and she was getting monthly disability checks. Those checks were getting direct deposited into her bank account. Upon checking her bank records, they learned that someone was withdrawing money from Portia's account regularly. Was this maybe Portia? Could she just be living under the radar? Using the timestamp of the ATM withdrawals, the bank was able to provide law enforcement with video of these transactions. Much to the family's dismay and authorities, it was not Portia withdrawing that money, it was Chadwick. And Portia was nowhere to be seen in any of those videos. Chadwick would go on to be charged with financial fraud for using Portia's card and withdrawing her money. Of course, this led everyone to wonder, where was Portia? In all this time, she hadn't been spending her own money. Chadwick had. If Portia was out there somewhere, how was she living if not using her own money? This caused grave concern among everyone who knew Portia and those investigating her case. Detectives were able to obtain a search warrant for Chadwick's home and car. They did state that they found possible biological matter in his car, which they did send out to the lab for testing. They have not given any more details as to what that was exactly or what they believed that it might be, and they have never followed up publicly regarding those results. Sadly, there were no clues to lead detectives to Portia's whereabouts. No one had seen or heard from her in over a year. She wasn't using her bank accounts or her social security number. It seemed that she simply fell off the face of the earth and vanished into thin air. Her name would hit the media, however, as stories of Chadwick Washington began to break. I do want to summarize this man's criminal history for you, and I want to give a shout out to the Web Sleuths user Nancy Drew for compiling this. All of these dates and charges are public record and are verified. He or she just did a wonderful job of listing it out and summarizing it. Here is that quick rundown of Chadwick Washington's criminal charges. February 27th, 2003. 2 charges of family violence and battery and 1 count of aggravated stalking. January 28th, 2004, 1 count of simple battery. June 15th, 2005, battery, family violence, and criminal trespassing. January 22nd, 2010, possession of marijuana, which caused his probation to be revoked. December 1st, 2010, battery. December 12th, 2010, battery and simple assault. March 24th, 2011, 3 charges of aggravated assault, aggravated stalking, false imprisonment, aggravated battery, and 2 probation violations. The beating of his girlfriend at this time, this is March of 2011, was so severe, her ears actually had to be sewn back on. This is what was reported by the True Citizen media back in 2011. Quote, according to Sergeant Dan Lowe, an investigator for the Burke County Sheriff's Office, Washington was still on conditional bond on March 18th when he allegedly lured his 35-year-old former girlfriend into his Highway 23 home under the pretense of returning some of her property. Once she was there, he wouldn't let her leave. The victim said he beat her Friday, he beat her Saturday, and then he dropped her off at University Hospital on Sunday afternoon. On June 1st, 2013, he would be charged with battery. On October 8th, 2016, fleeing and attempting to elude a law enforcement officer, driving with a suspended or revoked license, and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. Chadwick would spend a few years in prison at this point, and he would be paroled on February 19th, 2019. Note, shortly after this parole release, Chadwick and Portia moved in together. June 1st and July 1st of 2021, 8 charges of financial transaction credit card fraud, presumably against Portia. September 3rd, 2021, possession of cocaine and marijuana. This would be lumped in with the financial charges. May 3rd, 2023, exploitation and intimidation of a disabled adult, elder person, or resident, and hindering an emergency telephone call. Chadwick's latest infraction, we're up to May of 2023 now, was beating up his 72-year-old mother, taking away her phone so that she couldn't call for help, and holding her basically against her will. When she was finally able to escape the home, she went to her other son's house and they called authorities. She would tell law enforcement that Chadwick was dangerous. He was bipolar and schizophrenic, and he was also using drugs. Understandably, everyone believes Chadwick did something to Portia. But the truth is, we don't know anything for sure. And where is she? Waynesboro, Georgia is located in the northeast part of the state. It's a small town with a population of just over 5,000 residents. There are a lot of outlying areas in that part of Georgia and into South Carolina as well that are very rural, very wooded, very swampy. Waynesboro Pond seems to be the most significant water source within Waynesboro itself, but it also looks to be surrounded by residential neighborhoods and small businesses. It would be about a 2-hour drive to the Atlantic coast, both in Georgia and South Carolina, from Waynesboro. There are also several state parks within that 2-hour drive time frame. Since Portia, however, went missing so many months before anyone knew, she could be almost anywhere. If Chadwick is responsible, he had months and months to take her somewhere. Will we ever know where Portia is and what happened to her? Again, if Chadwick is responsible, we may only know if he speaks up or if Portia is found, and detectives can use the evidence to determine those answers. Or maybe if Chadwick confided into someone and that person comes forward. Do you think it's possible that Portia was in such a horrible relationship and a bad place with Chadwick that she just decided to run off and live under the radar? She didn't access any of her money at this point, but perhaps she was fearful of being found. What do you think happened to Portia Nesbitt? Portia is described as a Black female standing 5'2" tall and weighing around 110 pounds when she was last seen, which was possibly back in the summer of 2020. Portia wears her dark hair short and has brown eyes. Anyone with any information on Portia LaKendra Nesbitt is asked to contact the Burke County Sheriff's Office at 706-564-2133. Most people haven't heard Portia's story before. Maybe the few who are local to the Waynesboro area have, but beyond that, not much has been publicized about her case. There are many more stories like Portia's out there, and they all need our help to bring these missing people home. Thank you so much for listening to Portia's story. I know there isn't much to go on here, but we still need to bring awareness to her case. Portia is out there somewhere. She is a missing person who needs help or possibly needs justice. Thank you again for your support of our mission and our show. Let's keep sharing as many stories as we can. Let's keep being aware of our surroundings and what is happening out there. Please remember to reach out to me anytime with any feedback or case suggestions. You can do so on social media, through our Patreon, or via email at canwefindthem@gmail.com. You can always use the Contact Us form on our website as well. You can find that at wherearetheypodcast.com. We will be back again very soon with another unsolved missing persons case. And until then, stay safe and hug your loved ones.